Good morning. This is the BLAINESWORLD webcast that can be found each week on Facebook, YouTube, and LinkedIn. You can also listen in on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, and you can also catch previous shows and find out about future shows on my website, which is behind me, blainesworld.net. I'm your host, Blaine Greenfield. I'm here in my lovely studio in downtown Fairview, North Carolina. And each week we focus on cool things that are happening in both Western North Carolina and throughout the country. And toward that end, that's wanted to bring on today's guest, and he is definitely one of the coolest guys out there, Chuck Fink. Chuck, you can wave to all your fans and friends who are watching this. Okay, and that is Chuck Fink. And Chuck Fink is a storyteller, among other things he does. But I should mention that in terms of Chuck's background, it's quite an interesting one. He, let's see if I have background handy here. He began his telling stories as soon as he could talk. Although he learned the true craft for performance by taking a class of personal storytelling. I didn't realize that at Ollie in 2012. Who taught that? Do you remember?
I'm trying to remember now, but my memory is a thing of the past. It'll probably come up and I'll
Really
interrupt
good.
you to shout it out.
Okay. But anyway, took a course at Ollie. And for the benefit of folks who don't know Ollie, Chuck, if you would explain what Ollie is.
Yes, Ollie at UNC Asheville is one of about 120 Ollies around the country. And Ollie stands for the Osher Lifelong Learning Institute. And it's a place where people who are retired can take classes, can meet socially. There's all kinds of events there. And here in Asheville, we have one of the largest. So I took a class in storytelling.
Okay, and we'll give kudos to Catherine Frank, who's the director of that facility.
Absolutely.
But
Catherine Fink does an amazing job along with her staff. Yes.
But it's really cool. And we'll talk about Ollie in just a second, some other things, because that's, I think, maybe where I met you first, or one of the first times I met you at a course in Ollie. Um, we were taking a comedy class, right, together.
Yes.
Now, did you
That's
take,
I did a stand up and they told me to shut up and sit down.
did you take that before the storytelling or after?
Yes, I took that. And I don't know if you know Bill Petz, but
Right.
Bill Petz, who has Parkinson's, was the first comic up there. And I thought, well, I know Bill real well, but I probably can do okay after that. He killed. He actually tore up the audience with laughter, and I had to follow that. And I think it's time I went with storytelling
So as you'll see, Chuck tells, or you'll hear about the Chuck tells personal stories filled with comedy, drama, and most of all, hope. He teaches classes on personal storytelling for performance at the Weaveville Community Center and Ollie, as well as performing at the whole bunch of other places. He's president of the Asheville Storytelling Circle, member of the North Carolina Storytelling Guild, and the National Storytelling Network. It seems, Chuck, I don't know about you, but it seems to me you're just a little bit busy with all the stuff you're doing.
Well, I take a nap every night between midnight and 2 a.m. Yeah. No, it's, you know what? In retirement, if you aren't busy doing meaningful things like you are doing, Blaine, you just kind of wither away. So I love being busy and contributing to other people.
Well, one of the things I love about your story, Chuck, is how it kind of evolved, and I'll give you a chance to talk about that, in that you and I were both retired about the same time. What was it, about the age of 23 or something? But
Actually, I was 19 and you were 20.
but we
No, I
both
think we're a
retired.
year apart, Blaine.
Yeah,
And
but
by the way, folks, a quick interruption here. Blaine is about to turn 75 in June. I'll say the date, June 17th. So let's give a big shout out to Blaine Greenfield. And Blaine, I'm about a year behind you. So I think we look like we're lowering the average age to about 60 when
okay.
people look at us.
Thanks, buddy. And it's actually June 14th, but who counts? But at any rate, well, let's see, that would make me, thank you, I should say, that'd make me younger. So thank you for the shout out. But Chuck, your story just sounded kind of so cool because we met, I guess, in Asheville around the same time. We came to Asheville around the same time. And what I always admired about you was how you tried, and I want you to talk about this in terms of retirement. You tried different things, and each thing you weren't a failure to it, but I guess it brought you closer to what you wanted to do when you grew up. And talk about it, because no, I remember the very first time we were in the course taught by our mutual friend Randy Robbins, and you took the comedy course with me, and we had to stand up, and I kind of agreed with you. That was about it for me. But then what was so cool about that is you were trying different things, because before then, had you done your acting or you did it afterward?
No, actually, Blaine, I did my acting because of you. I remember taking a aptitude test
Right.
in my 20s, and they said you should be an actor or go into advertising. And I never did that, although my son inherited that gene. He's out in LA now. But I don't know. Because of you, I was in Gypsy, and I
Okay.
played four characters, and I had to remember my lines, which was not easy. But after that, and then also doing the comedy, I realized I could just mold that together and get into storytelling, which I define for my students. I'll have to clean it up here. Is BSing with an attitude.
What was it?
BSing with an attitude.
Okay, I love that. But what was so cool that you did it, Chuck, though? Because I guess like me, you tried a couple of different things. So you said you tried and you were relatively successful with acting and comedy, we'll say relatively, but you
You're so
kind
generous, Blake.
of but you kind of knew what, how do you know like that wasn't for you and that storytelling was for you?
Well, I think in my career, I was a consultant, and I also did some organizational development, management, executive training, and that kind of thing. And I realized if I wasn't telling stories, I would kind of way go to. And I also did a lot of humor because that keeps people awake. So I think it was in my genes. And as I define it as BSing with an attitude, I've had both my entire life.
So you then kind of had that in the back of your mind, but you took the storytelling class, and how did it evolve from that was, not that long ago to then not only telling stories, but then being in charge or being involved in all these storytelling groups? What was the very first time after you took the course? Do you remember the first time you actually got up and told a story?
I do. Actually, there were a few first times. I remember telling it at 35 below, and that story was about every time I hiked, I would fall into water. And then I did a couple of others. And David Joe Miller, a mutual friend, had been a producer of storytelling shows around Asheville. And I told in a couple of his shows, and it just connected. So those were some of the early ones, and it took off from there.
What I always remember, Chuck, one of the stories you told, and I've heard a bunch of them, but I think it was at one of David Joe Miller's shows. And I forgot it was a restaurant. I forgot the restaurant, but you knocked my socks off because that was the first time I heard a story that wasn't from you, that wasn't humorous. And talk about that too in terms of so stories can be, I guess, many kinds of stories, and that they can be humorous, but they don't have to be humorous.
Right. I think that what you're referring to, excuse me, is one that I no longer tell because it came with a bit of a personal cost. And that is, I had a mental health concern and issue. And I still work very, very hard to overcome it. So that story was really about hope. And it was my journey through that quagmire of mental health, if you will, and finally coming to a point where I feel good about myself. I feel good about the world. And I'll never fully recover, but I'm so far away from where I was many, many years ago. In fact, I look at life as an evolution. You evolve every single day. So as I'm not the same person that I was a week ago, a month ago, several years ago, maybe even yesterday, but it takes a lot of hard work. And I wanted to communicate that not only for people that had a mental health concern or their family or friends, it's anybody struggling through a life issue. In fact, I've coached another really good friend, Wallace Bohannon. And just last week, this is so touching. He's a veteran, and there was a program called the Moral Injury Support Group at the local VA. And it was facilitated by three chaplains at the VA. And there were six veterans who've been holding this deepest, darkest part of themselves forever and paying the price. In this program, they were able to come together, tell each other their stories, work on those stories, and then they had the final ceremony last week. And Blaine, I have never seen anything drawing so much emotion to so many people. And for Wallace, who served in the DMZ, it brought some peace. And I don't know if you know Wallace Bohannon, he
No.
is a great human being. And so to see him use stories to come through his trauma is just another thing that storytelling can do. It can be therapeutic.
Well, it's interesting you saying that because actually thought of that point, that being therapeutic. But does that happen not only with Wallace and with you, but that happens with a lot of people when they tell their stories?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. It's a lot cheaper than a therapist. And for many of us, it could be more effective.
Well, let me ask you this point, just on talking about stories, and it ties into a program you were just involved in, which I loved. It was a lie, where they were telling stories, but they were deliberate. They had to be lies or deliberate lies. What was the
Yes.
idea?
Like I say, BS is typically called a liar's contest where you compete to see who would tell the best lie. But we had so many tellers, we had 9. So we just made it a liar show or a liar's concert. And they are so much fun. Everything is made up. Sometimes it starts with a grain of truth, but it immediately goes into a lie. And they're so funny and so joyful. And by the way, if you win a liar's contest as a storyteller, you are creme de la creme. You are serious business at that point.
Well, not to have you repeat the whole story, but the essence, what was the essence of your lie?
Well, I'm from originally from Cincinnati, and in
Right.
fact, going back to see family. My son from California is flying in, and Cincinnati this year is managing to escape the cicadas. But for when I was there, every 17 years we had the cicadas. And one year I made, well, this was real, but I made up the rest. There was a place, a pizzeria in Cincinnati called Snappy Tomato Pizza. And it was owned by a guy who was down on his luck, bet his last money on a horse, and the horse was Snappy Tomato. So he invented this pizzeria. And for the cicadas, I changed it to Snappy Cicada Pizza. So the story was about snappy cicadas. But I must say, the others, some were just so funny. Sandra, who founded the Asheville Storytelling Circle, I'm guessing she probably in her 80s now. She told the best one about a relative that used dynamite whenever there was a construction or fishing expedition where he needed help. And they were just so rich, so wonderful.
We'll talk about then storytelling in general, especially when you teach it. So do you tell people to base it on truth or make up stuff?
Well, mine are those classes I teach are on personal storytelling or personal narratives. So even within those, there's always an element of stretching the truth, consolidating it. But no story is perfectly real. Let me put it that way. But there are other classes that teach tales, jack tales. As an example, last week at the Weaverville Community Center, David Novak, who is
Okay.
a professional teller of great repute, came in and told a story that was a combination of personal stories, an Asian tale. He even stood on his hands to to show how the earth and the sky separated. And he's not that far from our age. So to see this man do the physicality as well as the verbal stuff, it's just that's what stories do. They reinvigorate people.
And talking about great storytellers, David Novak is up there, just
Oh yes.
to have him tell a story. And so one of the things, Chuck, that you've done, which I want to give you a lot of credit for, is bringing storytelling, I'll say, to the masses, in terms of, we're laughing here, but especially, I guess, with some of the work you do, and talk a little bit about this at the Weaverville Center. Um, you have regular shows there, or how often do you have shows there?
It's really evolved itself. We started this community center, Weaverville Community Center, opened in October of 2001. And the first event was a storytelling show. And Jill Topman, who was a retired librarian, and I co-produced a bunch of storytelling shows since then. And I finally backed away. It became a little bit stressful for me. And at this age, as you know, we try to reduce the stress. So Jill is now handling it solo, and she's doing a fantastic job. She was the producer for David Novak. And we've brought in some other professional tellers, Tim Lowry, Connie Reagan Blake, Kim Whitecamp, my dear, dear buddy, Ray Christian, Becky Stone. And I hope I'm not leaving out others, but I probably am. And then we also have amateur shows. We have one coming up on the 27th. And then the Asheville Storytelling Circle is going to have a show there on August the 15th. So
Well,
we try to keep the community going. And frankly, it's become a major venue for storytelling and for audiences. If I may, just one quick example. Ray Christian and Becky Stone were part of a show that I produced with 4 Black tellers. Besides them was Wallace Bohannon, who I've mentioned, and Jim, the Black Potter, who lives here in Weaverville. And Jim's work is shown all over the world, but in Weaverville, he's not that well known. Well, the show was a monumental success. And afterwards, Ray Christian took me aside and said, this was the first time ever that there were 4 Black tellers on a stage without any white tellers. He's also a representative for the State Department, a cultural
Right.
ambassador traveling the world. And he said in all the audience he's been in all over the world that this audience was the most loving and gracious he's experienced.
And one of the things you've done also at Weaville Center, talk a little bit about this too, Chuck, is sometimes you when you have a class, you've had your students become tellers at the center.
Yes, we've had what I call a graduation show. And this year on July 17th, we're going to have 2 grads who are now in the storytelling circle. Wallace, who's all in the storytelling circle. And my wife, Cindy, and I are going to do a tandem tell, which 2 of us are on the stage at the same time. And if anybody is interested, here's the title of our story. She's trying to kill me. No, I'm just trying to get him off the couch. So it's going to be a lot of fun. And Darren Smitherman and Deb Martin were both graduates of the program, and both are now members of the Storytelling Circle. Deb is, in fact, a vice president, and Darren is just a wonderful guy who is also a great teller. So I'm very happy to help others get a start.
How often do you tell with your wife?
This will be the 2nd time, and yet we're still married. It's amazing.
Well, also talk about the fact too, I was impressed. You and your wife, I don't know if you're still doing it, but you were doing a podcast together too. Are you still doing it together?
No, we're not. I think Cindy kind of lost her ambition and drive for it, but it was called "In Love with the Finks," and we would the story that we're telling was actually on that podcast.
So, for the benefit of the folks who, say, for example, want to come to this upcoming show, how do they find out information about it? What's the best bet?
Well, as you know, I'm a bit of a promoter as well. So I
No.
posted on
You?
maybe about 10 or 12 Facebook pages. And I've run in the Ollie newsletter, and there's like 2,000 members of Ollie. And so it gets distributed. And the center also has a promotional method and plan. So those shows get announced. And if anyone is not on the Weaverville Community Center blog list, you'll want to add to that. And you can email me. We'll get all that later. And we'll just add you to the list. And that way you get informed, not only on storytelling, but there are so many classes held at the center, and you'll be privy to all of that.
And since you mentioned it, why don't you mention the email now, Chuck? So if you want to find that information about both some of the programs at Weaverville Center, but also about the Asheville Storytelling Circle, first of all, you said your email address you'll share?
Yes, it's chuck.storyville@yahoo.com. chuck.storyville@yahoo.com.
And specifically about the Asheville Storytelling Circle, is there a website, Facebook page for that specifically?
There's a Facebook page, Asheville Storytelling Circle. And I think there's a web page too. And it's also Asheville Storytelling Circle. But I think Facebook is probably the best way. It's updated every day with new information. And we have about close to 50 members. Not are all extremely active, but we have 50. And we're now trying to target younger people. One of the things with storytelling is if you look around audiences, you see a lot of gray hair.
And you also see a lot of no hair.
And so you're going to take off those ear things so we can see. Huh?
Right. It's got a haircut. Yeah. So that's interesting. So
we have others as well. There's a wonderful young woman, Carolina from Colombia, and she's now a member. Deb is under 65, so she's younger. Darren is probably in his 40s. And at the last meeting, we had 2 other young people come. And quite frankly, I just love seeing new people inspired. So this year, to promote that, we hope to go to elementary, middle schools, and high schools to tell stories and bring the young people and the younger people, the elementary school kids and their parents into the world of storytelling.
By the way, you probably do this or know it already, but is the Asheville Storytelling Circle, are you on Instagram as well?
No,
Can I
no,
make a,
we're too old for that, Blaine.
can I make a suggestion? Just the point you're making. I do that as well. That, yeah, I still love Facebook. I'm a Facebook kind of guy, but everybody under 50 is not on Facebook anymore. They're all on Instagram, you know?
Yeah,
And
my
just,
kids tell me that.
no, I had to learn that too. So your point is a good one about the age of the group. That if you want to get younger, people they look at Instagram more than Facebook. So talk a little bit more though. You mentioned become a member of the actual storytelling circle. uh, Dues, the secret handshake. What happens?
Well, the welcoming ceremony is the paddling machine. No, I'm kidding. We have a meeting. It runs on the third Monday of every month from 7 to 8:30, and it's here in Asheville at the Chamber Building on Montford
Oh,
Avenue.
very
And the
nice.
second floor is the Lenore Rhine University conference room, and that's where we meet. We met there last Monday, or this actually 2 days ago, and we had maybe 35 people there. And so it's growing. And the fun part of the meetings is we cover a little business at the front end, but then it's all sharing stories. So if anybody has a story that they're working on, they can share it and get feedback. And it's just a wonderful vehicle for people that are into storytelling.
Really
We have
cool.
listeners too.
Yeah.
Not everybody's a storyteller.
But so they come to the meeting, and then so if they want to join the circle, is there a dues thing
Yes.
or
Yes. It's let's see. If you are under 65, it's $30 a year.
right?
If you're 65 and older, it's $25 a year. If you're a student, it's $15 a year.
Very
And we can
nice.
be gracious too. If that's a problem, we will give a scholarship.
Very nice. So let's talk about then somebody wanting to get into storytelling. So we've talked about a couple of ways, but what do you suggest? The very first thing, if you want to get into storytelling, should take a course in it or just come to an event, or what's the best
I
way to
would
get
say
into it?
the first thing to do is actually go to a few storytelling shows. And you never want to copy someone and be like them, but you'll get a lot of tips and clues and techniques that you'll see from a variety of tellers. Some will be funny, some will be serious, some will tell personal narratives, some will tell jack tales, which are big in the Appalachian Mountains. The most
What,
famous one is Jack and the Beanstalk, obviously, but people get into that. After that, I would urge someone to take a class. A lot of professionals have their own classes. Connie Reagan Blake,
right.
who is local, has several classes per year, and she is just a wonderful person, a wonderful storyteller, and just a very gracious teacher. So Connie teaches them. I teach the freebies in Weaverville. We might be offering them through the circle. Again, we want to do those for no charge. David Novak is another one who has classes. So if you're interested, first go to more than one show, gather it all in, and then if you're still motivated, then take a class. And when somebody takes a class with me, if they want to continue, I continue coaching them as long as they want.
What about watching stories and looking at stories on YouTube? Is that a way to pick up stuff?
Oh yeah, yes. As a matter of fact, yes. I have a YouTube channel, Chuck Fink Storyteller, and it's got not only that, but as you know, Blaine, we both had radio shows on a local station, and my show was called Storyville. So there are quite a few of the interviews there with some phenomenal tellers: Ray Christian, Connie Reagan Blake, uh, Kim Whitecamp, Tim Lowry. It just goes on and on. So you can also hear how they got into storytelling and some of their tips and thoughts, as well as they would tell a story on each show. And if I may, there's two storytellers that were on my show. You can't see it, but I'm clutching my heart. One is Gwenda Ledbetter, who was the
Okay.
co-founder of the Circle in '95. She's now 93 years old and the most lovely human being you could possibly imagine. and I was interviewing her daughter, called to remind her to take her medications. And when and when we were finished, she said, "Are you going to interview David Holt?" And I said, "Well, I hadn't planned on it." She said, "Oh, you've got to interview David." So I contacted David, and David not only appeared on the show, but we were having some technical difficulties with Zoom. So he came out here and he met Cindy, and he's such a great human being. He too has had to give up storytelling because of Parkinson's. And actually, his last show was in December, I think, of 21. And I formed a men's group, and I wanted David to be in it. And I mentioned Bill Petz. And David and Bill both are dealing with Parkinson's. So I wanted them to communicate together. And David and I have established a really nice friendship. So we both owe that to Gwenda Ledbetter. And again, David he toured with Doc Watson for
Yeah.
14 years. He was part of the original Merle Fest. He had a radio show on PBS called David Asheville's Storyteller. I forget what it was called now, but he's just a wonderful human being. And quite frankly, one thing about storytellers, I have never met one that is rude, obnoxious, mean spirited. Most storytellers have a glow of kindness around them.
And talk about something else too. You were saying how you met David or got involved with David. Something else Chuck Fink does in his spare time. You were the person who started all the men's groups through Ollie. Are you still involved in that at all?
There are now 21 groups at Ollie, and I actually dropped out
I
because
remember. Yeah.
my group just wasn't heading the direction that I was hoping it would. So I then started this group with David and Bill, and we have let's see, 3 other guys besides me, and we meet every other month. And then there was another couple of guys that I knew wanted to be in groups, but our group wasn't taking any members, so I started a second one, and I'm not going to do any more. But I must say, to give hope to men, we don't talk about sports and we don't talk about all the stuff you would expect men to talk about. We open up from our hearts and we share stuff that we're going through as older and retired men. And there's also social stuff. So don't get me wrong, we do know how to party as well. But it's just so cool to see changes in the men, their partners, their wives, and even their children. So it's one of the good things I've done, I guess.
Well, talk about that, Chuck, and it really is one of the really good things you've done. Because what's so great about that is it started from nothing. And you can't even talk about the story. I love how you tell the story of how it started, that when you came to Asheville, and talk about it in terms of Cindy and what you saw, and then your observation and how you started them.
Yeah, well, we came to Asheville, and that mental health issue I was talking about earlier was popping up because it involved change, and people with my condition can have trouble with change. And I was experiencing that, and Cindy was on the receiving end sometimes. And I realized, besides therapy, which I was getting, I needed to share with other men some of the deep stuff that's been going on. And that was the reason that I started the group. Cindy came up with a name, by the way. The ones at Ollie are called Men's Wisdom Works.
And the cool thing I think about that, Chuck, was what you pointed out to me at the time, is that guys just didn't have that kind of opportunity. You know, like I said, they go to a ball game or something and talk about it, but they never talked. And you were saying women have lots of opportunities to do this.
Yeah.
But isn't that something, Chuck? You mentioned the number, go from 0 to 21, and even further compliment to you that even though you're not directly involved in it, the group's still in existence. You know, isn't that great that, you know,
Well, I
that's
left it in the hands of the most capable man. His name is Buck Bragg,
okay,
and he's
sure.
a retired attorney and a pretty high level attorney with State Farm Insurance. And he, like me, had the same view of these men's groups, the importance of sharing from the heart. So Buck has taken over, and frankly, it's grown. I think when I left, there were 19 or 18, and now there's 21 going on 22. So, and I play golf with Buck once a week. And he's, how do I say this? He's better at the men's groups than he is at golf.
Well, talking about golf, I'm honored. I don't know if I was the first one, but I may have been to have been the first one to tape one of your stories, if you recall. And it was about golf. Remember, you came over to my house that one time,
Yes.
and YouTube, there were a lot of stories. So you told one of my favorite Chuck Fink stories, the golf story,
Yeah.
about
And,
your
and I'm going to
infamous,
tell it again.
what you are, yeah.
On June 22nd, the Blue Ridge Storytelling Summit, the first annual Blue Ridge Storytelling Summit, which is going to be held at the Center for Pioneer Life, just north of Burnsville. It's actually got a Burnsville zip code and address. And Burnsville is maybe 30 miles, 35 miles north of Asheville. And the unique thing about this place is all the original structures from the pioneer days are still there. It's run by two sisters who are descendants of the original family. And when you go there, you get to see the original house or cabins, the original barns. And we were there. There were goats with baby kids strolling around. And there's a woman, Kisa K, Kiesa.
Oh, sure. I know her.
And she's just a wonderful woman. And she is now the head of events at the center. So she came up with the idea of having the Blue Ridge Storytelling Summit on June 22nd. And I'm going to be the MC, and I think there's 8 other tellers. And it's going to be just a fun day. There's going to be a workshop in the morning. Then we go into the stories, and it's got seating for lots and lots of people. And you can go online to the Center for Pioneer Life, and I'd Google it, and you'll find more information there. And it's just going to be a wonderful show. If I may, we have some. Oh, here we go. Now you get to see how old I really am. Glasses. Here's the lineup. First of all, the workshop is with Sherry Lovett and Nancy Reeder. They are both just wonderful Western North Carolina storytellers. So they're going to have a workshop. And then here's the lineup. Nancy Reeder, Sherry Lovett, Knut Rary, who is not from this immediate area, but he's excellent. Then I'm going to tell, and then Wallace Shealy, his wife, Catherine Yale Sirota, and then one of my favorite tellers of all, Lee Lyons. She is from South Carolina. She has the most unique Southern draw you ever hear. And then she gets into the most graphic stories you could possibly imagine. And then we'll have Larry Perlman, who's the past president of the Storytelling Circle. And the big star is going to be Connie Reagan Blake.
And she is the best, exactly. Chuck, one other thing that you mentioned, some people might be listening to this, but I think it shows the value of storytelling if people want to get into it, that unlike acting, they don't have to memorize everything. And we just comment on that a little bit, because some people might be scared about the fact that you have to get up and tell a story.
Yeah. Well, I always tell my participants or students, no one will remember what you forgot. What will happen is a lot of times you're in the middle of a 15, 20, 30-minute story and a line disappears. Just keep on going. No one knows what you were going to say. And that's part of it. I think the other thing is it's not really memorizing like actors do. By the way, I think actors and musicians are extremely competitive. My son is a now retired actor out in LA. But musicians also can be very competitive. Storytellers, we're very supportive of one another. We want everyone to win. So it's a unique performance type, if you will. And I think because of that, we don't have to memorize. It comes from our heart. If you're telling a tale, you might have to memorize that tale. But even tale tellers will fudge it up a little bit in the moment because they might forget something. But if you're telling a personal story, you don't have to memorize. I always tell my students, start here in your heart. Just say it out loud and then start using your brain to edit and to get it the way you want it. But you don't have to memorize, and you really shouldn't try to do that, at least at first.
And you really raised a good point too. If you forget it, the only person who knows it is you, or in your case, maybe Cindy would know it. Your wife might know it, or about that line. Chuck, to wrap up, let's just recap a little bit. So you have a lot of exciting events. I think I have just some of them here, but we have the Blue Ridge Storytelling Summit, and that's going to be on June 22nd. And again, to get information on that, and all these other events and a whole bunch of them, best bet is to go to the
There's several. You can go to my Facebook page, which is Chuck Fink Storyteller. You can also go to the Asheville Storytelling Circle, which lists everything that's going on in this area. In terms of Weaverville, you can look up the Weaverville Community Center. It was a nonprofit, the Weaverville Center for Creative and Healthy Living.
right.
And that's actually being retired on June 31st. And now the town of Weaverville is taking that venue over. So if you email me at chuck.storyteller@yahoo.com, I will gladly forward your information also to Weaverville so you can be added to their information list as well.
Definitely something to be added to. And you mentioned there's going to be the center on August 15th. That's going to be an Asheville Storytelling Circle event. And the
So,
last one,
by the way, when you get Asheville Storytelling Circle members, some are professional, like Connie Reagan Blake and Ray Christian and Tim Lowry. But everybody else, if we're not professional, we're semi-professional, which means we don't make our living at this, but we will get paid, and we don't turn our heads away when somebody says, you want this. And sometimes it's tips, but you're going to get a level of storytelling that is more than just hanging around a campfire.
okay. Well, I'd like to thank you, Chuck, for being my guest on this edition of Blaine's World webcast. Also like to thank my producer, Cappy Tassetti, and hopefully we'll be seeing you, Chuck, in the near future, if not sooner. Thanks, buddy.
Well, one more thing. Happy
Sure.
birthday, Blaine.
Okay, thanks. And stay with me. You and I'll wrap up afterwards. Thanks, man. Speak to you soon.